Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah.
Everyone here at ISKCON of Toronto welcomes His Grace Deva Madhava Prabhu. Come on, Haribol. Haribol. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're continuing our reading and discussion of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Right now we're on Canto 1, Chapter 5. Today's verse is text number 36. Kurvana yatra karmani Bhagavat chikshaya sakrit Grananti gunanamani Krishnasya nusmaranti cha Kurvana yatra karmani Bhagavat chikshaya sakrit Grananti gunanamani Krishnasya nusmaranti cha Kurvana yatra karmani Bhagavat chikshaya sakrit Grananti gunanamani Krishnasya nusmaranti cha.
Kurvana yatra karmani
Bhagavat shikshaya sakrit Grananti gunanamani Krishnan smaranti cha. Kurvana, while performing, yatra, thereupon, karmani, duties, Bhagavat, the personality of Godhead, shikshaya, by the will of, asakrit, constantly, grananti, takes on, guna, qualities, namani, names, krishnasya, of Krishna, anusmaranti, constantly remembers, cha, and. Translation. While performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers Him, His names, and His qualities. Please repeat. While performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers Him, His names and qualities. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. An expert devotee of the Lord can mold his life in such a way that while performing all kinds of duties either for this or the next life, he can constantly remember the Lord's name, fame, qualities, etc. The order of the Lord is distinctly there in the Bhagavad Gita. The order of the Lord is distinctly there in the Bhagavad Gita. One should work only for the Lord in all spheres of life. In every sphere of life, the Lord should be situated as the proprietor. According to the Vedic rites, even in the worship of some demigods like Indra, Brahma, Saraswati, and Ganesh, the system is that in all circumstances, the representation of Vishnu must be there as Yagneshwara, or the controlling power of such sacrifices. It is recommended that a particular demigod be worshipped for a particular purpose, but still the presence of Vishnu is compulsory in order to make the function proper. Apart from such Vedic duties, even in our ordinary dealings, for example, in our household affairs or in our business or profession, we must consider that the result of all activities must be given over to the Supreme Enjoyer, Lord Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has declared himself to be the Supreme Enjoyer of everything, the Supreme Proprietor of every planet, and the Supreme Friend of all beings. No one else but Lord Sri Krishna can claim to be the proprietor of everything within his creation. A pure devotee remembers this constantly, and in doing so, he repeats the transcendental name, fame, and qualities of the Lord, which means that he is constantly in touch with the Lord. The Lord is identical with his name, fame, etc., and therefore to be associated with his name, fame, etc. constantly means actually to associate with the Lord. The major portion of our monetary income, not less than 50%, must be spent to carry out the order of Lord Krishna. Not only should we give the profit of our earning to this cause, but we must also arrange to preach this cult of devotion to others, because that is also one of the orders of the Lord. The Lord definitely says, is everyone able to concentrate? The Lord definitely says that no one is more dear to him than one who is always engaged in the preaching work of the Lord's name and fame all over the world. So what did Prabhupada say so far? That Krishna's order is there in the Bhagavad Gita. What else? And who's got the other microphone, by the way? Where did everybody go? Okay. What's something else that we heard so far? This is a long purport. Yes?
50% of our income should be given.
50%. 50% should be given, no less than 50%. What else did you hear? Thank you. What other points did you hear so far? Yes.
That Sri Krishna is the proprietor.
Okay. Who has a dictionary? Yeah? Look up proprietor. See where the word comes from. Anything else? Devotees should constantly remember the Lord. I'm sorry? Yeah. I want to know what it means too.
Someone who owns is legally the possessor of a business. Origin 1639, owner by royal grant of an American colony, probably from property owner.
What?
Property owner.
That's it?
Probably from property owner.
Try ETYM etymologicaldictionary.com. ETYM. Is that what it's called? ETYM. Can you find it? Krishna is the proprietor. We should always remember. Also, this point is Prabhupada made it. Any yajna, any sacrifice that's done, even for the demigods, the Yajneshwara has to be there. Actually, the Shalagram Shila is always present at the yajnas to oversee everything. Otherwise, it's not properly represented when you do the yajna. Yajneshwara has to be there. What are you, an English major?
No.
Okay. Okay. Then Prabhupada goes on to say that even in ordinary dealings, not to speak of Vedic yajnas, but in ordinary dealings, whether you have a home or a business, you should also keep Krishna in the center as the proprietor. Remember, he's the proprietor. And then Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavad Gita, how the Lord declared himself the supreme joy of everything, proprietor and friend. From which verse is that? 529. The verse, please. Someone with a microphone. Just chant it. Go ahead. Good. One who has the microphone rules the world. Okay. And then, startlingly, the Lord is identical with his name, fame, etc. And therefore to be associated with his name, fame, etc. constantly means actually to associate with the Lord. That could be a mission statement for one's life in and of itself, something to fully focus on. So it's been a lot so far, even in the first half of the purport, right? Keep going? 3 people. Okay, 5, 6, 7. Everyone else cover your ears. The Lord definitely says that no one is more dear to him than one who is always engaged in the preaching work of the Lord's name and fame all over the world. The scientific discoveries of the material world can also be equally engaged in carrying out his order. He wants the message of the Bhagavad Gita to be preached amongst his devotees. It may not be so done amongst those who have no credit of austerities, charity, education, etc. Therefore, the attempt must go on to convert unwilling men to become his devotees. Lord Chaitanya has taught a very simple method in this connection. He has taught the lesson for preaching the transcendental message through singing, dancing, and refreshment. Through what? Singing, dancing, and refreshment. SDR. Singing, dancing, and refreshment. Refreshments are always good. You know, if you say refreshment, it means you're going to get some good stuff. Singing, dancing, and refreshment. As such, 50% of our income may be spent for this purpose. In this fallen age of quarrel and dissension, if only the leading and wealthy persons of society agree to spend 50% of their income in the service of the Lord as it is taught by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there is absolute certainty of converting this hell of pandemonium. This what? Hell of pandemonium. Sounds Shakespearean. To the transcendental abode of the Lord. No one will disagree to partake in a function where good singing, dancing, and refreshment are administered. Everyone will attend such a function, and everyone is sure to feel individually the transcendental presence of the Lord. This alone will help the attendant associate with the Lord and thereby purify himself in spiritual realization. The only condition for successfully executing such spiritual activities is that they must be conducted under the guidance of a pure devotee who is completely free from all mundane desires, fruitive activities, and dry speculations about the nature of the Lord. What should one who we listen to be freed of? What 3 things? 1. It's a pure devotee of the Lord who's completely free from which 3 things? Mundane desires. Number 2. Yes, dry speculations, yes. And 3rd? Fruitive activities. 3 things. No one has to discover the nature of the Lord. It is already spoken by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita, especially and in all other Vedic literatures generally. We have simply to accept them in toto and abide by the orders of the Lord. That will guide us to the path of perfection. One can remain in his own position. No one has to change his position, especially in this age of variegated difficulties. Age of what? Variegated difficulties. Get a nice variety of difficulties to choose from. The only condition is that one must give up the habit of dry speculation aimed at becoming one with the Lord. And after giving up such lofty, puffed up vanities, giving up what?
Lofty, puffed up vanities.
One may very submissively receive the orders of the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam from the lips of a bona fide devotee whose qualification is mentioned above. That will make everything successful without a doubt. Sheer poetry, isn't it? Purvana yatra karmani bhagavach chikshaya sakrit grananti gunanamani krishnasyanusmaranti cha krishnasyanusmaranti cha krishnasyanusmaranti cha krishnasya, of Krishna, anusmaranti, constantly remembers cha. While performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers him, his names and his qualities. So, in the verse, and also, as Deva Madhava Prabhu remembered from the purport, the importance of following the order of the Lord is mentioned in this verse and purport. And in this second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the matter of the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, in the 4 nutshell verses of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada mentions that the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a manifestation of his internal potency. And it's by that potency that one comes to see the Lord face to face. And Prabhupada, near the end of this purport, mentions how simple the process is when one accepts the Supreme Personality of Godhead's instruction in toto. In the Gita, Krishna says, Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manava. That if you just accept my instruction without being envious, then you'll be fine. And in the next verse he says, if you don't, then you won't be fine. So there's a different result when one follows the order of the Lord and when one doesn't. The results are vastly different. Anyadevahur sambhavad, anyadahur asambhavad, iti shushumadhiranam yenas tadvij chakshadesh. Sri Upanishad says, the dhiras, learned persons who are sober, have carefully considered this and have noted that one result is obtained by worshipping the supreme cause of all causes, and that another result is obtained by worshipping that which is not supreme. I heard in a conversation Prabhupada had with a famous yogi who was not so much inclined to back up what he said with Shastra. And in the conversation, this man made a statement that God is mysterious, he's hard to know. And Prabhupada disputed that. He said, actually, it's not a secret. And that's another phrase the man had used, it's a secret. And Prabhupada said, actually, Krishna says who he is in the Bhagavad Gita, and he says what he'd like us to do. So it's not a secret, it's open to everybody. And this was one of the ways in which Prabhupada was able to be effective and continues to be effective, because he sticks to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his presentation and asks those who are his followers to do the same thing. Of course, this is the tradition in the Vaishnava culture, as Rupa Goswami is included in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Shruti Smriti Puranadi Panchratchaki Vinamvina Aikantiki Harer Bhaktiru Patayaiva Kalpate. That any kind of devotional practice is done without reference to the Shruti, Smriti, Panchratchak Vidhi becomes a disturbance to society. So this is a simple kind of way to perfect one's life. One has to set aside one's own agenda, meaning speculating about the absolute truth. And this is also referenced or mentioned in the final part of this purport. And the verse that Prabhupada is referring to is from the 10th canto, 14th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in which Lord Brahma says, Jnani prayasamudapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukharidam bhavadiyavartam. Stane stita shrutikatam tanuvan manobir ye prayaso jita jito tyasitais trilokyam. Which is a very helpful verse for unburdening us and giving us a clear path to the absolute truth. And it starts off, Brahma starts off by saying, give up all attempts to understand the Lord by your own intelligence. Don't speculate. Jnane prayasam, completely give up the propensity to try to understand God through your own thought processes. Namanta eva jivanti san mukharitam bhavadiyavartam. And he says that you should instead hear about the Lord and actually worship the sound vibration that comes from an authorized source that describes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Stane stita means that you don't have to change much of anything else. No adjustment to your television set needed. That was something that we used to hear when we were kids, back when we had TVs. You guys probably never seen a TV before, but I saw one when I was a kid. And it was a square box, and it had little, what we call rabbit ears on top. Other than that, it was on the roof. They had an antenna. There's still some around. You can see them in museums. And sometimes you'd have to adjust that in order to see the picture clearly. Actually, quite frequently you'd have to adjust it. But sometimes it was the fault of the station itself, and a message would come on the screen saying, don't adjust your television set. Don't try to adjust your antenna, it's coming from somewhere else. You don't have to readjust very much in your life. It's not always possible anyway because of my conditioning from the modes of material nature. But stane stita shrutikatam tanuvan manobir. If you dedicate a portion of your time, to start with, to hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then there will be a systemic effect in one's own body and mind, and then outwardly in one's life. And how far can you go with that strategy? Ye prayaso jita jito means that the ajita, who's Krishna, unconquerable, becomes jita, means conquered. And how is he conquered? Because of one's dedication to hearing, one becomes so affectionate towards the Lord and dedicated to him that the Lord feels compassion and actually gives himself to the devotee. So this is how one can come to treasure one's intimate relationship with Krishna, by the process of hearing about him, especially from the Bhagavatam, supplemented with the Bhagavad Gita, which should be a daily fare. So that's two things I've said so far. One is that the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not a mystery or a secret. And it's very much available, especially in Bhagavad Gita. And for those who are connoisseurs of happiness, also in the Bhagavatam. Because real happiness comes from hearing Bhagavatam. And if one can come to embrace the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as it comes from Bhagavad Gita and also through the bona fide representatives of the Lord who follow Bhagavad Gita in toto, then one comes directly in contact with the Lord. And that was one point. And the other point was that hearing is very important. They sort of intersect, those 2 points. But hearing is the gateway. It's a gateway drug. You take that, and next thing you know, you'll be dancing and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff to glorify the Lord because you're so happy. So those are 2 points. We'll just take some reflections on that, and then we can look at a few other points in the purport also. Let's just talk about those two, or any reflections you have so far about that. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'd like to reflect on the point that you said about we don't have to readjust so much. Rather, by starting hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, it will happen naturally for us.
Yes. There's a verse I'm thinking about in the... Which verse am I thinking about? It's mentioned that by hearing Bhagavatam, then what reestablishes the relationship with the Lord and the lotus of one's heart. Okay, I'll think of it in a minute. Yes, Prabhu. But Bhagavatam is Krishna, and by hearing Bhagavatam regularly, of course, Prabhupada set this up. So, this means our devotional society in a way in which we would take time every day to hear the Bhagavatam. Of course, there are other classes as well. When I joined the temple, there were 5 classes a day. Now there's 1 in many places, sometimes 2. But the more the better, but especially Bhagavatam should be heard every day. Yes, Prabhu?
Yeah, so my reflection, I like the point where it mentions that one should not use their own intelligence to speculate who God is. So that's really like an eye-opening one.
Yes.
There are so many people making their own assumptions about who God is without, like you said, the yogi who does not back his facts.
Yeah. It's an important point, and it goes to a philosophical point, which is that in any discipline, doctrine, you have to know, you have to have some axiomatic truth that you're basing your practice on. And that would also bring us to the point that you also have to be able to prove, at least yourself, why that is axiomatic. And it comes to epistemology, which is how do you know something. We find that Jiva Goswami, when he begins to explicate the meaning of the Bhagavatam and how it relates to the teaching of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, begins with his Tattva Sandarbha, in which he establishes a framework so that we can understand why this is valid knowledge. It's not sentiment. In postmodernism, there's a tendency, not a tendency, but actually a axiomatic truth that there is no axiomatic truth. And that your truth, in fact, it's built into the language these days. And it's like, oh, that's your truth. I have my truth. There's this truth, that truth. But that's different from axiomatic truth, and it produces a different kind of society and lifestyle and so forth. So my point is, it's important to educate oneself about this, why there is a true source of real knowledge, absolute truth. There is an absolute truth, a center. If one understands that and believes it through understanding, it's well reasoned, in other words, then one can really put one's heart into the practice. I quoted the other day, Siddhanta bolya chitanakara alash iha hoite Krishna lagi shudrud manosh. From Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami says that don't be lazy when it comes to understanding what the philosophy is, where it comes from. The Siddhanta means what something is and also what it isn't. It's very precise understanding. So Siddhanta bolya chite na kara alash. Alash means to be lazy. But Prabhupada says there that one should discuss the philosophy thoroughly threadbare, because the more one triangulates and comes to a precise understanding. For instance, Kaviraj Goswami is saying, I've studied this very carefully, I've heard about it, and therefore I'm very clear that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he says in the next verse, I worship him with all my heart, because I've understood who he is. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. No matter what happens, just go on fighting. Okay. There were some other points. Yes, Prabhu.
During the verse you mentioned, it's in the third canto.
Oh yeah, you got
Chapter
it?
9. I don't know the Sanskrit, but that the Lord manifests his many different forms according to the desires of living entities to worship him.
Well, it's a different verse, but it's very nice.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Yes? Other points? What are you all thinking? It's a discussion, so you feel free to add to it. Yes?
I was appreciating what you just mentioned about Jiva Goswami and the reference to our Vaishnava epistemology, and then that my friend Jai Jagannath used to like to quote that verse a lot. This is not to fully educated. We should be very not lazy, so very energetic and active to try to understand the Siddhanta and to hear. And there's a purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, where Prabhupada says that the seeker of absolute truth is always busy with researching that absolute truth. They don't have any time for sense gratification because they're so busy trying to understand more and more.
Yeah.
There's a lot of books and a lot of things to understand. So a lot of work to do.
Yes.
So this conversation, like it reminded me of passing of the Prabhupada, where he was flying somewhere with one of his disciples, and Prabhupada says, okay, I'll assume the role of an atheist, and you are a theist, so let's debate and see who wins, or let me see what arguments you present. So Prabhupada, in that sense, defeated his disciple. So now the disciples are, okay, now I know what arguments Prabhupada used as the atheist. So Prabhupada said, now you become atheist and I'll become a theist. So that is like again the argument started and he thought, okay, I know arguments, the arguments that Prabhupada made. And Prabhupada won again as a theist also. So he won both times as a theist and atheist. And then Prabhupada told him that this is how we should be about the Siddhanta and everything. Like from both sides we should be like crystal clear so we can direct others.
Yeah, nice points. One of the ways that we become more clear about the philosophy, Prabhupada mentions in the purport here, that we should teach Krishna consciousness to others, both within the circle of devotees and also outside of the circle of already established devotees. And in the process of doing so, we'll find where the gaps are in our presentation, because there's nothing more helpful than making a mistake in the process of teaching Krishna consciousness to others and finding out where one's deficient. And I've always noticed in the assembly of devotees where the philosophy is being discussed thoroughly threadbare, that one can go away from such a discussion with more questions than answers. There's never a point at which we'll answer all the questions. We can't circumscribe the Supreme Absolute Truth, otherwise he wouldn't be the Absolute Truth, because ultimately he's unlimited. And you might have noticed that sometimes when people ask, do you have any questions? To a large assembly, there might be 300 people, do you have any questions? And maybe a few people will have questions. And maybe they're good questions. But one of the best assets one can have is good questions. Because if you have good questions, at some point you're going to meet somebody who can answer them for you. Trade? Okay. And when one discusses in the assembly of very astute and sincere devotees the philosophy of Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, then naturally one will go deeper into the matter and one will find, oh, I definitely have a question about such and such a segment of the Bhagavatam. And then when you meet you'll notice that, oh, I'm speaking to a qualified person now. You'll hear the person speak and notice that he or she has gone deeply within the philosophy and is dealing with a category of knowledge from the Bhagavatam that would probably match your question. Then you can ask it. And we're moved forward in this questioning and answering, or forward or deeper into the philosophy of the Bhagavatam. You said, in coming to this Siddhanta, there are many books, which is true. I've noticed that the Bhagavatam itself is so vast in its knowledge that even if one were to dedicate this entire life, how puny as it is, or to getting as much from the Bhagavatam as possible, or giving as much to the Bhagavatam as possible, one wouldn't, it wouldn't be exhaustive. You'd simply see more and more that it's an ocean, meaning that it's deeper than I can fathom. And then even I've noticed in doing such a thing that, not that I have, but thinking about it, that one's necessity for finding many books becomes slightly reduced. Nothing against many books, I have many books, but mostly for reference. Because how much time does one have to allocate to studying Bhagavatam, or the philosophy in general, and how do you apportion it? How much to the Gita, how much to the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita? Now you start talking about many other books. How much can you go into them? And deeper into the Bhagavatam can take us unlimitedly into the depths of Krishna consciousness. So, were there any other ready comments? Because otherwise I'm going to read another section of this purport. Just Prabhupada says that we should dedicate a major portion of our monetary income to preaching work. And he says that if some of the society does that, just the leading and wealthy persons agree to give 50% of their income to the service of the Lord, as taught by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then it'll improve the situation of the world. The hell of pandemonium will be helped. So this is a real prospect that we should be encouraged to work on. Not that it's a hopeless task, although sometimes it seems unwieldy, getting the devotees together, organizing our communities so that they are productive in the way of bringing new life, new devotees, educating the devotees that are there. It's not hopeless, and it will be effective. It is effective. But as Prabhupada's saying here, we should apply ourselves and our resources to the organization of our communities, and especially the ways in which we present Krishna consciousness, and that we're able to take care of people when they come to Krishna consciousness, so they can assimilate the philosophy and be assimilated into the society and feel part of it. So there's a lot of pioneering work to do in that area, and we should be encouraged to go ahead and do that, dedicate our resources to that. Otherwise, resources will be spent anyway, said in the passive voice. They'll just go away. because by default, everything will get used up. But if we're deliberate about using our time and energy to cultivate Krishna consciousness and help spread it around the world, we'll really have a good occupation. And because the order's here also, it's another point to do it, Krishna emphasizes it, then even if it's a modicum of success, that leads to a very stable life in Krishna consciousness, if one is able to get that kind of work, where one's really fully dedicated, or giving at least a large portion of one's time and income to helping Krishna consciousness. You'll notice that people who do that are well established in their own practice of Krishna consciousness and in the eyes of the rest of the society. What about that idea?
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Okay. What else? Try to say something provocative. Yes. Krishna Ganga Prabhu. Does that work? No. Oh, question. Good.
Yes. You talk about having too many books and how much good you have to make.
Yes.
Too many books.
Yes.
But when we are approached by people, who wrote their own books that based on Krishna's books, how do we approach that? How do we respond to this?
What do you mean approached by those who are?
To get their books.
Oh, okay. Well, I wrote a book, but I don't approach very many people. Although I didn't mind putting it out there because, I think that at least I can only tell you my approach is when other people bring me books. I try to be really respectful because anybody who wrote a book, I respect, because it's not easy. And especially if they took a portion of their life to write it, so I try to buy their book. Not that I promise to read it, because I may not have time. And in some of the books I look at them and I'm not sure if I'm that inspired to read it. A lot of them are really important. I mean, there are some very important books that have been written that give us a deeper idea of Prabhupada, who he was, the movement, the history of our movement, and so forth. And also, we can't underestimate. Well, we should be aware of the fact that those who are following a pure devotee are also pure, because how would one do that if one wasn't? And that if someone receives instructions from a pure devotee, lives the life that person has prescribed, then that person also becomes empowered. And we should see for ourselves that the writings of such people are also potent. Otherwise, what is the use? If we're not tasting something from the writings of others who followed Prabhupada, then we might as well just give up. Because if they weren't able to imbibe what he said and then translate it into something that's meaningful and transformational, then we're following the wrong process. I've seen, actually, this is anecdotal, but a professor in Colorado who's become inspired as a bhakti sadhaka he started as a Buddhist. He's a PhD, done a lot of research into religions of the world. He's a follower of the Dalai Lama, but then got association with devotees and read the Bhagavatam a couple times and the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but from an academic point of view. However, and his heart didn't change so much. But when he read Vishaka's book called Harmony, which was her observations from the world around her at Sharanagati in Canada, and relating it all to Bhagavad Gita. And there was a section in there where she talked about the existence, the individual soul, and how it exists. And when he read that part, he said that's what transformed his life. And then he was able to go into Prabhupada's books more deeply. So none of these writings are in isolation. They're all interrelated. If one is following, as Prabhupada says here at the end, if one is following the instruction in toto, it means that such a person becomes a channel to offer Krishna consciousness to others. That's how Krishna consciousness spreads from one era to the next, through the purity of the followers of the philosophy. Parta vipashrita epi su papayonaya striyo vaishastata shudras tepi yanti paramgatim. Tepi yanti paramgatim means, well, the verse means that anybody from any situation in life, whoever they may be, if they follow Krishna's instruction, they can reach the supreme destination. That means that while they're alive, before they leave this world and achieve the supreme destination, they have something to say that's very valuable. That's a long answer to a short question, but I honor those who take the time to write and offer things. I usually buy their books if I can, to support them for what they've done. And then I keep them in a huge pile at my house, and pray that someday I get a day off so I can actually read it. Thank you for your question, Prabhu. Any other comments? Devamata Prabhu has a comment. Okay.
The verse gave me this question of what do we know to be Krishna's instruction? It's a common question for devotees and myself also, what is my duty? And then you answered, and also Prabhupada revealed in the purport, but you brought up those verses in the Gita that it's out of envy that we don't recognize Krishna's instruction. So that might be I was feeling that was a nice universal answer rather than what is your specific duty that's very difficult for any other one person to point out unless they know you intimately. But to recognize that I can't see the instruction of Krishna in my life because of my own envy, that's helpful.
Yeah, that's an important point. That I want to do what I want to do. I don't really want to follow anybody else, especially God. I'll follow other lesser people, but if there's a suggestion that there's an absolute authority, then I might recoil if I'm envious. So it is a happy day when one has the clarity of mind and the feeling of surrender within one's heart to wholly embrace the order of the Supreme. And Prabhupada, in his introduction to the Gita, tells people that, okay, I understand, you may have a problem with hearing from the Absolute. But for now, suspend disbelief and just read it as if, it's kind of a trick actually. Because if you do that, it's like, okay, I accept it's God, I'll just read it in that mood, then you're kind of finished. But, he presents it that you have to take it as absolute, and if you do, it'll have that special potency. And if somebody's simple and accepts, then it saves a lot of time, because the intellect can get in the way. Jnane priyasam varapasya namanta eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vartam. Stane stita shrutigatam tanavan manobir ye prayaso jita jito pyasitaistrilokyam. Again, Brahma says, don't depend on your own power to try to understand this. It's way beyond you. It happened to him because he thought that he could understand Krishna, and who is this cowherd boy in Vrindavan? And he challenged his power. And then he found out how insignificant he was. So that led to his epiphany. What else did you hear, or other questions you have? Prabhu? Oh, that's all right. I saw you processing something, I thought. Okay, that's all right. And also, we've had a few days together hearing Bhagavatam and other things, other classes. Any things that you've heard over the last couple days or realizations that you have that you want to bring in? It's a good time to discuss them. Yes?
This is from today's class.
Okay.
I've noticed whenever this topic of giving money comes up, it's usually kind of a sore point. It's difficult for people to know exactly how to apply and to give a general rule of thumb to live by, because in general, the modern situation is everyone is very much in debt, and so it's hard to have any money to give away when you feel like you're owing, more money. You mentioned yesterday how much of our income goes to just paying our living expenses and so on. So, but I'm very grateful to my wife because she's always kind of pushing us to give as much as we can in charity, and I've heard a few good stories of devotees that have lived by a principle of giving, a certain fixed percentage of their income, and they've seen that the Lord has provided for them. And so it's really, the meditation I've had on it is that it's really a luxury to be able to give in charity. And for example, when I got married, I was in a master's program. And so going into a master's program means you're taking on, like 6 digits of debt, basically. And then we were married, we conceived, and we were getting ready to have a daughter. And I realized I had no stable place of residence or income or anything. So we had no idea what we were going to do, basically. We thought maybe we'll go to Japan and try to teach English or something. But then we drove through Michigan, and out of the blue, Deva Madhava said, well, I have a friend who is looking to hire people. And so I got a job with him, and he's a devotee. He has prasadam catered to the office 3 times a week. And I'm making good money there, and it's all just kind of fell in our laps, really. And just because I see it as basically because I had, it was very begrudgingly for the first 2 years that I would give money in charity, very begrudgingly, but my wife was very encouraging. So now I can see that actually Krishna's taking care really nicely. And so, Hare Krishna.
Thank you for that testimonial. It's helpful to hear. And yes, Nirakula. Well, I always do, but doesn't mean I should say it. Go ahead.
Krishnadas Kaviraj Prabhu.
Oh, Krishnadas Kaviraj Prabhu is still with us.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
He said, singing, dancing, refreshments. Singing touches and awakens the soul. Dancing lifts one's spirit to Krishna, and refreshments give us the full satisfaction for which we are always anxious. Then we can tell people that this is all based on the most voluminous, consistent, and exacting philosophy in the world, and then this is all capitalized. So take a book, read it, and establish this in your life.
Wow, so articulate and really nice reminder that although there's philosophy to contemplate and discuss, ultimately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu made this every man's movement. You can go out and have a festival or stay in and have a festival and people feel satisfied. Prabhupada mentions that in the purport, that this is the only way that actually people can feel satisfied is by individually, he said, experiencing the presence of God. And that has to be there, otherwise there's no change. and there's no ultimate satisfaction. And we see people from various walks of life. Like I mentioned, this professor, he was actually really touched by the devotees coming to his campus. He facilitated them from a point of view of an open-minded professor, not absent-minded, open-minded, to facilitate other kinds of discussions. And then really got caught up by the mood of the singing, the dancing, the refreshment, and so forth. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's one thing I've noticed on a practical level is the importance of our presentation. And that the more that we refine it, like for instance when we're doing Harinams, we've seen at Silicon Valley and tinkering with our presentation of Harinam, which I very much believe in. I like being out in public because things happen when you're out there that don't happen when you're not. One of them is you meet people, and when you meet people, stuff happens. But the way that we meet people, the way we present to them actually makes a difference. And there's this, very valuable discussion going on about, what is the value of a Gyata Sukriti? Is there much value if we just present Krishna consciousness without people knowing what they're doing and so forth? And then, so I thought about it a lot when I was writing my book, so I wrote 2 chapters. One of them was about the power of a Gyata Sukriti, but the other one was about the importance of thoughtfulness. That we shouldn't just rely on a Gyata Sukriti, that just because we're chanting out loud, that's it. Otherwise, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wouldn't have given any consideration to how he configured his Harinam Sankirtan parties, who he had dance, who he had chant. There was obvious care that was put into it. What to speak of the way he changed his appearance in order to affect the public. His taking sannyas was utilitarian. It wasn't some idea that to follow the Vedic process or something like that. He changed his dress. It was wholly a consideration of how people would respond to him, and he wanted them to respond in a way that was respectful, so they'd make advancement. So in Silicon Valley, we've experimented and plan on doing a lot more in 2019 with the appearance of our Harinam, which we started by calling it a mini festival. And then we named it the Kirtan Oasis, with the idea that when people would come there, they would be caught by the appearance and they wouldn't notice it, but it's so organized that they'd feel like joining in and being part of it. And the more that we've refined it, as I just said, the more that we notice, it's demonstrable that people are attracted and they stick to it. They come and they don't want to leave. And so the more we put our money, as is mentioned here, resources, where do they go? Into developing systems, both digital systems and also physical infrastructure, but and also our presentation in public, how we interface with people will make a big difference. And also, since I'm on a roll here, just talking about building into whatever outreach we have a very solid follow-through and back end, as I'd say. So when somebody comes, we know exactly where we're bringing them and where they would fit in, and also that we give our attention to filling in the gaps. If we see gaps, we should fill them in. Gaps means places that people fall through the cracks, where they'll come to Krishna consciousness, but then there's a place where they don't fit and they can't sustain economically or culturally. There are many different reasons. And real compassion means to brainstorm ways in which to accommodate people so that they don't fall through the cracks. And this is something that would require 50% of the income of as many people as possible. And those kind of resources spent wisely can really make a big difference in presentation. I mean, every little adjustment, like I've seen, it's amazing how one small adjustment can make a huge difference. As an example, just on Saturday when we went out door to door, we were in that, I wanted to go Arabic speaking section, so we found something. I didn't know till about a half hour into it that they were Christians. And when I figured that out, it made a big difference in our relationship, because Salam alaikum, alaikum salam, Allahu Akbar wasn't cutting it. Even though they spoke Arabic, they'd look at me like, get out of here. I just came from Iraq and I'm a Christian. Nirkula tried to warn me because she saw Christmas ornaments, but as usual, I didn't listen. And but then the point is, when I did figure it out, or when it dawned on me that I need a slightly different approach, and I was more Christian in my approach, then it worked, or worked better. And every little edge we have where we can see how it works better, whatever we can do to find that out and implement it. Don't be lazy with that either and think this is the way we've always done it. That's the death of a movement. Movements can't move when people get calcified. I mean, look at technology. It moves so fast nowadays. You can't keep an iPhone for more than a couple months without it being obsolete. I mean, you might say, well, that's just indulgence or something, but only if you're using it for yourself. If you're using it for broadcasting and things like that, we should always be on the cutting edge of everything. And I'm not just talking about technology, spiritual technology also. Always innovating and being very attentive to what people are thinking, hearing, saying. And that goes for our outreach and also within our temple environment. I just like to put it, what's the lowest common denominator when somebody walks in? What does it look like from their perspective? It's so easy to become used to the environment, and we're comfortable with it, so we assume everybody else is. But if we take ourselves out of that and consider, can they see everything? Can they understand everything? And the more we avail ourselves to their perspective and make it accommodating to them, the more they'll feel it and respond. So that's something that can be worked on. Prabhupada's talking about 50% of income, but income, it's just money. You can throw money, you can get money and then just waste it on all kinds of stuff. I mean, you can just build things that don't mean anything because there's no life inside. But really, we should give our energy, our brainstorming energy, the kinds of management skills that we know how to use, and the literary, expertise we may have to make the presentation of Krishna consciousness relevant to as many people as possible. And this takes a life endeavor. It's kind of exciting to do that because you can see the results, and people come, and it's real, and it's very meaningful. So that's why Sankirtan and considering all these things is life. It's the life of our movement. What do you think about that? Prabhu?
In the Bhagavatam,
Uh-oh, where's the mic?
I appreciate a lot what you just said and entreated us to do. And Prabhupada was saying the same in a purport I read a few days ago in the Bhagavatam. He said, a devotee is as thoughtful as a materialist is speculative. Which
That's
I felt
nice.
he was speaking exactly to what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There is a life, a full absorption, which really includes, not only absorbing in the first part we talked about, going deeply within the Bhagavatam and applying it to our own lives, but also thinking how to spread the mission. And these two things go really well together. There's a nice balance, the two things. Couple more minutes. Any comment or question? Prabhu, it percolated.
I just wanted to ask, yesterday you were speaking about attitude.
Yes.
And the theme was how can you make the next year, make the most of it. And you spoke about attitude. And you started by saying that we have a choice to, as humans, we do have a choice and we can change our attitude. So I thought that was really beneficial to hear that, because sometimes I think that this is how I am, so why bother changing it? Everyone else can adjust themselves around me. Thank you very much for saying that. So I also wanted to ask if you have any other practical tips in terms of how one can change the attitude so that one can become a better individual, a better spiritual practitioner, and we can make our community and world a better place.
Well, one thing is, especially this time of year, because we're in Q4 now, getting ready to start over in 2019, and it's just in general a really good idea to take time to think about what you're doing. Don't assume that you got it all right, and in fact assume the opposite, that there's a lot of room for improvement. And if you look for it, if you take time, and it takes time. Nirukula and I, every year at the end of the year, we take 4 or 5 days to hide somewhere and just talk and then think. And it came to bear just the other day. Last year we had done this exercise where we went away to some hiding place and just took time to talk about what worked well, many other things. But one of the things I wrote down in my notebook that I left in the cab, but they found it. But was, what are all the obstacles? What are all the things I'm doing? I listed as many as I could think of, like, here are all my duties. And then I thought about, what's holding them up. And, when I was able to actually look at the obstacles, what are the actual shortcomings, and look at them carefully and then brainstorm ways to overcome them, I felt a release of energy, like, okay, I can move forward. Otherwise there's this oppressive feeling like I'm stuck. I can't do anything, can't change my attitude, can't change my life. It invokes depression when one thinks like that. And the answer is to be thoughtful. Who was it? Zig Ziglar used to talk about, or maybe it was Earl Nightingale. He used to talk about, you get a legal pad and a pen and sit by yourself. And don't even have to wait till the beginning of the year. You can do this anytime. You can do it every day if you want to. And sit and think. Close down all the other portals where people are trying to get at you. And just think for yourself, how am I doing? What am I doing? What am I thinking? And write it all down. And just the other day I was talking to a devotee friend of mine who's an expert in project management and so forth, and I had all the information that I wrote down at my retreat. It was so useful, because he had questions for me and I had answers. This is what I'm doing, this is where my shortcomings are, and I said, okay, here's how to line it up, here's how we can fix it. So find out what you're doing and be really clear about it, and also don't be afraid to make goals, because goals are potent, as my friend Will McCoy says. Goals are potent. I love that mantra. It sounds so elusively simple, but it's really powerful. And if you have goals, then it'll lift your life. If you have the right goals, you got to have some ambition. You got to be thinking, what am I actually going for? And it's got to be really clear. And then have some focus in your life. Get rid of all the other stuff that's holding you back. You just get rid of it and move it out of your life as much as possible, so that you can focus on the things that really matter to you. Then your life becomes really vital. And as far as attitude goes, find out that, like, what is my attitude? Try to figure it out, and then try a new one on for size. You can just say, okay, I have a different philosophy about who I am and what I mean to other people. Like the one I mentioned was go from being the center of attention to being the servant and helping other people. You can just do that in conversations. You might notice that when you're discussing with people, the tendency is to always insert yourself in the conversation. They're talking about their family, and then you say, yeah, but my family, I can tell you something more about my family. And I'm thinking, as soon as this person stops talking, then I'll tell them something really good. And instead of doing that, take a new attitude. Just like, let me just promote this person, what they're saying. See if I can encourage them, and I'll just stay out of it completely. Try that one on for size. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can try that just immediately changes the way you interact with the world and with people. And it's all invited by the Bhagavatam and the culture that we're living. So there's an unlimited scope for improving. And it's miraculous how much, if you go into this idea of humility, it's amazing how much humility is promoted by Krishna, by Bhagavatam, by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it's like, why don't I try it for a change? Instead of just quoting the verse, actually try it out and see how it works. Like, make my, 2019, my attitude is humility. In all aspects. Narada Muni says this in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. He said the way you walk, the way you move, the way you interact with people. He mentions it's a holistic process. You integrate it into your life. Try that 2019. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just saying as an example, one might say that, this is what I'm going to do, and I'll integrate it. Then sit down with your legal pad and pen and think, what are the ways in which I can integrate it into my life? And you'll walk out of the room with a new attitude. Gaur Premanande, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo, Bo, Hari Bo, Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Almost. Vanchakoptarishcha kripasanameva patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo.
Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, hey, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman, Natari Armarman.